And now to tonight's Insight segment. We're talking about African Americans in aviation. Statistically speaking, Black people make up less than 4% of aircraft pilots and flight engineers in the U.S. And while there have been efforts in recent years to increase the numbers, the progress is now in jeopardy. DEI initiatives have been rolled back and programs are being dismantled. So, what's next in the push to get more Blacks flying the friendly skies? My guests will share their thoughts about that and much more this evening. Ray Robinson is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel and currently a captain and pilot with UPS. He's also former chair of the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, and Talib Karim, founder and CEO of STEM for Us, a nonprofit dedicated to expanding AI and STEM education among underserved communities. Thank you both for joining this important conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, brother.
Sure thing. Let me give you a couple of fast facts here. According to the 2023 Bureau of Labor Statistics report, 93% of current airline pilots are white. Only 7% of aircraft mechanics are Black. And it really wasn't until 1926 when the Department of Commerce licensed James Herman Banning as the first Black pilot who was licensed to fly in the U.S. We certainly have come a long way since 1926. But, Captain, let me ask you first, what are your thoughts about the lack of diversity in aviation? Why do you suppose that is?
Well, I think it certainly centers around our humble beginnings of not being afforded the opportunity to get into the industry. And so when you think of the Tuskegee Airmen and certainly what those men and certainly the women that were part of that program back during World War II, that certainly was an impetus behind getting more folks into the overall industry. And since that time, there are a number of organizations that try to coach, teach our young people about the opportunities that are in the aerospace industry. And so I think we still, suffer from that point where kids are just not getting the exposure, certainly at an early enough age to make that segue into the industry.
We know that over the past couple of weeks, President Trump has sought to dismantle DEI programs across the board. What impact do you believe that will have in, earlier efforts to increase diversity in the aviation industry? And let me say also, Captain, obviously that question is for you, but more broadly as it relates to AI and high tech positions within the federal government.
So I'll certainly start with the DEI portion first. And one of the things that has happened, certainly in the last, 10 years or so, that phrase and certainly what it means has been hijacked. And so when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're talking about gaining a broader aspect approach to who has and who can compete in some of these positions across a number of sectors. And it starts with representation at the table. And so in order to facilitate the change that we're talking about, from 93% and 7%, the only way that those numbers change is that we continue to have influential conversations about teaching our young people about the opportunities in the aerospace industry. Now,
let me ask you, hold on real quick, because I want to get Talib in real quick before I take a break. Talib, your thoughts about high tech and AI in the federal government as well as DEI. You've got about 30 seconds. I'll let you finish on the other side.
Well, as a lawyer, Brother Harold, I'll just say that we have to, as Colonel Robinson mentioned, we have to distinguish between civil rights for African Americans and DEI, totally separate. DEI is not based upon either constitution or statute. it's based upon an executive order or a series of executive orders that were issued in the last administration. And so every administration has its prerogative to issue new executive orders or to continue those. And so our rights as African Americans have been fought for over 400 years in this country.
Hold your point.
Definitely continue on the other side.
Oh yeah, hold your point. I've got to take a really quick break. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation about DEI and African Americans in aviation will continue on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We are continuing our conversation about DEI and African Americans in aviation. My guests are Ray Robinson, a retired U.S. Air Force colonel and current captain and pilot with UPS. He's also the former chair of the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. Also in the conversation, Talib Karim, founder and CEO of STEM for Us, a nonprofit dedicated to expanding AI and STEM education among underserved communities. Talib, please continue your point.
Right. So, when we talk about, again, the notion of the the competitive advantage that the United States has over, for example, its international adversaries such as China. One of the things that we have is a population that comes from all over the world. And as you may know, just recently, the DeepSeek app replaced the American AI app, ChatGPT, as the #1 most downloaded app, especially for AI. And they did it within a fraction of the cost. And so what we have, like the movie Hidden Figures, we have HBCUs, for example, which have a wealth of talent and research that can be utilized in the models that are being conversed or condensed, if you will, into these AI labs that will allow our data to surpass the data that, for example, our Chinese adversaries have. So clearly, the ability for us to beat the Chinese in the AI race is the same as we were able to beat the Russians in the space race. And as you may know from the movie Hidden Figures, it was those Black women who were working for NASA as computers doing scientific calculations that allowed us to win the Sputnik or race against the Sputnik, if you will, in the Sputnik race. So this is our Sputnik moment, as one entrepreneur said, and I believe that African Americans, and in particular HBCUs such as Howard University, are clearly the hidden figures that will allow us to basically win that race as a nation.
Captain Robinson, as you think about some of the rhetoric that we've heard over the past week, when we look at, for example, the tragedy that occurred over the Potomac last week, and comments about DEI being responsible, the president making those comments without evidence that was responsible for this, and realizing that certainly accidents are going to happen, whether it's commercial or military aviation. But the reality is, in both, the number of minority pilots is very, very low. What do you think about that?
Well, one of the things we have to keep in mind is number one, the machine doesn't know the operator. The machine doesn't know if it's a male or a female that's operating. The machine doesn't know the skin tone of whomever is sitting in those seats. And so once the machine is moving in an environment, in this case, through the skies, it's incumbent on all of those professionals to come together to safely operate. And as you mentioned, accidents unfortunately happen. It's just a number of things. They could be mechanical, they could be, the collision like we saw. There are a number of things that could happen in those settings. And so what we have become accustomed to is acknowledging that an accident took place and then allowing those investigators, in this case, the NTSB, to come in and gather all of those pieces, if you will, to try and recreate what happened so they have a full understanding and they can make recommendations going forward. So it's kind of irresponsible to get ahead of the NTSB and certainly what they're trying to do for political points in this case. And I think, as we still grieve with the families and certainly with those controllers who were in the tower and saw that situation unfold, they're still trying to process what transpired. And so it's going to take some time before the results of that investigation come out. And I think that's one of the things we should all wait patiently for that thing to happen. But the notion that, this person, this male, this female, because of who they were, is problematic with operating the airplane, that's just foolish.
And to that point, and I'm sure just last week, there was an Air Force pilot who survived an F-35 fighter jet crash in Alaska. And suffice it to say that some of these crashes make the news, some of them don't, but the numbers don't lie. And we don't see a lot of Black pilots or women pilots having these accidents. One could argue not because they are better or worse, but because the percentages of these pilots is so low that usually the people who have these accidents are white male pilots.
Right.
And if I could jump in there, I want to bring it back to the conversation about, again, DEI versus having representation, particularly of Black people in aviation. And again, the way in which the executive order was written, there were, suggestions in those executive orders to create, opportunities for people to be hired not based upon their merit and the content of their character, for example, which is what Dr. King talked about. And so, I might find some common ground with the idea and the notion that the president had that everybody should be at the table based upon their merit. But we have known, and I can say this firsthand because the way I met Colonel Robinson was that we were both students at the United States Air Force Academy, where the best and the brightest students from across the country are recruited, and many of them were trained to be both pilots. And for myself, I was one of the few African Americans in the astronautical engineering program. And I can tell you that the reason that I left the Air Force Academy and finished my matriculation in engineering at Howard University is because of the hostile and racist practices that many of our institutions, such as the Air Force Academy and such as the Air Force and other pilot training programs, have. And they get rid of or weed out or basically dismiss Black pilots and Black students at a disproportional rate, unfairly. And so I think that, if the president wants to truly realize his goal, and I think he does, to create a society in which we are judged by the color of the content of our character, not the color of our skin, then what we absolutely have to do is to eliminate that environment that, in fact, does the opposite, rewards people who happen to be, European based upon the color of their skin. We can't say that competency is one color. We have to acknowledge that competency and excellence comes in all colors. And if we can do that, we as a nation can beat every other nation across this country because we have competent people of all color.
Captain Robinson?
No, I agree wholeheartedly with, with Talib and certainly his characterization about, the content of one's character. I think we as a society need to certainly put that at the forefront, but we can't ignore, some of those barriers that people who are sitting in high positions, if they are going to continue to subscribe to that old way of thinking. And I use the term in years of the past about, a families and friends plan. And oftentimes when you have family members or you have friends who are, well connected in certain aspects of your maturation, you may be given opportunities or exposures that others of us don't necessarily have a chance to get access to. And so when you talk about someone who's a doctor, whose father is a doctor, and they're bringing their young children into the office to understand, what it means to be a doctor that provides this level of service, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to encourage that young child to follow in their parents' footsteps or their extended family footsteps, whereas someone who doesn't have that same access to that type of career would not necessarily get the same. And so what we're talking about is, hey, how do we expand what we're doing? Because I contend if you never leave your 3 blocks, you won't know what's 5 blocks over. And so we as a community of people have to continue to share what's going on 5 blocks, the next city, the next town, and the next state over, so that we can grow and teach our young folks that there are other opportunities that are available to them.
What kind of obstacles or challenges did you face as you were trying to, establish your career as an Air Force pilot, Captain Robinson?
I went to the Air Force Academy to follow in my father's footsteps, who retired from the Air Force. And so I had no aspirations to fly when I went to the Air Force Academy. It wasn't until I got one of my freshman roommates and then additional roommates, and all those folks talked about was flying airplanes. And when I got to my junior year, we had what's called a graduation physical. And it was at that physical that the flight doctor told me that I was pilot qualified. I wore glasses, but it was still within the Air Force parameters to go and fly. And so I asked her, so you just shared with me that I'm pilot qualified. Well, what does that mean? And she told me that you can fly airplanes if you want to. And so that day, a brand new door opened for me. I had no idea what it would entail. Thankfully, at the Air Force Academy, there was a flying program that I was able to go and learn how to fly a Cessna 182. And once I got a taste of what that was like and soloed the airplane, the world just opened up for me. And then certainly going off to pilot training. Well, no one in my family had any type of flying experience. And so I didn't have anybody to call from that standpoint. But what I did have was classmates who graduated a couple years before me that were off in pilot training. And I consulted with those guys about their experience in that pilot training world. And they did say, yes, it is a hard environment. But if you wake up every day and you put in the work and you are what we call chair flying every day, you will proceed towards graduation. And so it was just that type of persistence, if you will, that certainly my classmates that we went and graduated through undergraduate pilot training, it was that collective bond that we formed to get through this. There were two brothers in our class out of I think we started with 33, we graduated with 27. And so the two brothers, we both graduated. And so And then went on to have great Air Force careers, and we're both currently flying in the airline industry now. But I submit to you that it's there's nothing else I'd rather do than fly airplanes. And it all started because someone presented me with that opportunity. And so my charge in life is to try and coax our young people to consider the same thing, because of, certainly the joy that I had get out of it. Not only serving our country, but presently, serving our customers all over the world.
Which brings me to my next question for both of you. And let me give you the context even before I ask, because even in this conversation, I was thinking, and I want to mention a name which you may or may not know, a very young man by the name of Christopher Ballinger. And Christopher Ballinger in 2022 was one of the youngest pilots, a young Black man. And he was just amazing, just a really, really amazing young man. He was 17 years old when he was licensed as a pilot. He is now in his third year at the U.S. Naval Academy. And the reason I know this is because his mother and I are wonderful friends, have been friends for years. I'm sure Sylvia wouldn't mind me giving her a shout out in this conversation. But the thing about it is that Christopher has the support of an educated mother and access to some resources that some in our communities do not. So Talib, for a young Black kid who has aspirations to fly, or may not even know that they can have aspirations to fly, how do you reach them? How do you put that opportunity in front of them?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what STEM for Us was created to do. And recently, you may have heard that President Trump, together with some of our nation's top executives in the technology industry, like Larry Ellison and Sam Altman, the founder of ChatGPT, have come together with the founder of SoftBank to propose and to invest now it's up to $1 trillion to increase jobs, particularly around AI and other STEM fields in the United States. And so what we've called for, and they don't have any laid out white papers to deploy that money. So we, at STEM for Us, we're the first to develop a white paper on how they can actually accomplish their goal, which is 100,000 jobs, how we could actually create $100,000 with a tenth of that dedicated to every historically Black college and university across the country. And the way in which we say we can do that and make sure that young people like Chris Ballinger, and I saw some of his posts out there, have the opportunity, and other people like Chris Ballinger, is to create after school programs that are STEM focused. So young people, instead of going out, as you know, the most violent time of every day, Monday through Friday, are the hours from 3 until 8 p.m. Why is that? And that is because children get out of school and their parents are mainly out of the house at work doing other things. And so they don't have supervision. Our program would provide them that supervision, and hopefully, in partnership with Colonel Robinson and other aviators, we can create programs that will teach our young people to fly. My son, again, 17-year-old, going to one of our DC public schools, Jackson Reed, is a pilot, got his pilot's license while, again, doing exactly what Colonel Robinson did. First of all, flying, simulators on the computer, if you will, and then graduated to actually get some time in the craft, and now has beaten his pop. I'm still a student pilot. I still have I've soloed, but I haven't actually gotten my private pilot's license. And my father also, who was a pilot as well before me. So this is, again, to the president. What we say is that African Americans in this country have always been excellent. And the reason why Black History Month, as you know, was created 99 years ago by Carter G. Woodson is because that excellence, despite the fact that we were excellent, we were not given an opportunity. And it was the same thing, as you might know, in the Olympics. Jesse Owens, who was excellent. He was the best athlete, but he wasn't given an opportunity until the United States gave him the opportunity. And we showed how excellence was displayed in the context of that realm in terms of the Olympics. And Black aviators, Black air traffic controllers, Black pilots like Colonel Robinson, Black mail handlers, the people who actually went into that river and found those bodies and recovered them. Many of them are Black and brown people. And so we do ourselves a disservice to conflate DEI, which may have been correct in terms of creating quotas, with the idea of having representation of people who are Black and brown and from all parts of the world. That is the United States superpower. And if we do again a 180 turn in the wrong direction by underfunding, for example, HBCUs versus investing in HBCUs, then we as a nation will not be great. And I encourage the president to take a look at making sure that we get that $100 billion to make sure that we address some of these problems in our neighborhoods.
Captain Robinson, how do we get this dream in front of young people, the dream of flight?
Through the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, through Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, the Bessie Coleman Aerospace Legacy, Negro Airmen International, a lot of our organizations, Sisters of the Sky, a lot of these organizations, offer that programming, whether it be in the summer or in around the school year format, to try and encourage our young people to at least consider. And I recognize that, selfishly, I would like everybody to become a pilot. I think the industry, the need is going to be there for the next 15, maybe 20 years. We're just not producing enough pilots, in the United States. And so why not encourage our young people to consider this as well? And if you don't fly, that's fine. But there are other careers that are just as fulfilling in the aerospace industry. We talked about the air traffic controllers, the mechanics, the engineers. There's a myriad of careers that are involved. And so these organizations that I mentioned, offer certainly those middle and high school age students an opportunity to come in and experience, what it is to be or see what folks in the aerospace industry are doing. And so specifically the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, we have 41 summer programs that are throughout the United States, and 2 of them are down in the Caribbean and in Virgin Islands and in Puerto Rico. And all of them are geared towards teaching our young folks about, hey, opportunities in the aerospace industry. So I think for certainly those kids that have access and maybe affluent to be able to do those things, that's one thing. But the other side says, hey, there are organizations that can generate scholarships and provide opportunities for you to continue to move in this pathway. And I think we're seeing it now as the FAA is probably getting ready to go through a big hiring splurge because they've been understaffed for quite some time. And so why not, if you can't fly, well, at least you can tell somebody where they need to go. And there's a joke inside the industry that, the only people we listen to are air traffic controllers. But I neither here nor there. But my point being, I think that's how we continue to expose our young people.
Yeah. And to that point, I just also realized today that next week is the Black Engineer of the Year Award. It's going to be in Baltimore, the 13th through the 15th. And I used to do some work with them years ago. And I will say you find all kinds of engineers across the industry, not just aerospace, but I will just mention that I remember one day during this conference that there was a Black man who had on his flight suit, and he was walking through, and I overheard him say, I don't have a lot of time. I just wanted to, and he was talking to obviously a colleague, but I wanted to make sure I came in to see you. He said, I just got out of my F-16. Came into what they called at that time Bowling Air Force Base, not Joint Anacostia Bowling. And he said, I only have an hour. Wanted to come and give you a hug, brother, and see how you're doing. But then I've got to catch a cab and get right back because I need to be in California. And you talk about, even for a man like myself, a grown man who, you know, my flight fantasies stop at television. But the pride was certainly there because, you know, again, F-16, you know, it's not rocket science, but it is. And you have to be, at that time, to be the best of the best to fly an F-16 fighter jets. And to see that and to know that, you know, fighter jets, this multi-million-dollar technological marvel is in good hands, was a great thing of pride. I've got a couple of minutes to leave some final thoughts about where we are regarding DEI and, you know, and technology. Is this an opportunity?
It is an opportunity, and I tell you, the biggest opportunity, I'm speaking to the parents out here now, is that we have to push our children to excellence. The reason why there is even this notion that there was some type of, unqualification, which is clearly not the case, because from the voices that I heard, you know, the air traffic controller did everything right to make sure that the Black Hawk pilot knew that there was a airline in his sight. Twice he checked and gave him the instructions to follow behind. But we have to, as parents, we have to push our children, challenge our children, take away from our children the phones and the access to the cars and all the other goodies that we have showered our children with that have created this idea that they can be less than excellent.
All right, and Captain Robinson, I'll let you have the final word. I've got 20 seconds for you.
Well, you know, just to piggyback on what Talib says, is there's a number of opportunities that our young people certainly are ready to take advantage of. They are smart enough to do all of these things that we're talking about if we channel their energies and we minimize those social distractions that are taking place so that we can get the best out of our kids.
I want to thank both of you for spending this really important time to talk to us about this. You got to pay attention, and particularly for you pilots, definitely keep your head up.
Yes, sir.
Talib Kareem, Raymond Robinson, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That is the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, February 5th. I'm Harold Fisher.